Welcome to the debate. I mean, what happens when a viral, brightly colored Lego animation contains a more brutal, accurate autopsy of geopolitical collapse than, a stack of academic papers?
Right. It's definitely not what you'd expect.
Not at all. Today we are analyzing a really fascinating piece of media titled Global Oil Crisis, Strait of Hormuz Explained in Lego. And on the surface, if you just glance at the screen, it's this hyperkinetic, fast-cut meme video.
Yeah, it deliberately adopts that viral TikTok feed aesthetic.
Exactly. You've got pure Lego-style 3D animation, plastic toy boats, bright primary colors. There are no realistic humans anywhere, and it's driven by this punchy rap-style narration dropping text on screen, yelling about, price shocks and global tension.
Right, and you expect a simplistic, almost infantile breakdown of a map. But when you actually strip away the plastic toy aesthetic, when you parse the textual narrative running underneath that 3D animation, you're confronted with a really dense Machiavellian treatise on the collapse of modern statecraft.
It's a total Trojan horse.
It operates entirely as a Trojan horse, yeah.
And that Trojan horse brings us to the core friction we are exploring today. The source material presents a multifaceted crisis triggered around the Strait of Hormuz. But, what is the actual root of that crisis?
Right. What's the actual disease here?
Exactly. And I will argue that this text is primarily a critique of strategic and economic self-sabotage. It's about a literal disruption of global trade networks where market manipulation and physical choke points result in catastrophic, soaring oil prices. The economic failure is the disease.
Well, and I will argue that you are treating the economy as the disease, when it is clearly just a symptom.
Oh, really? Just a symptom?
Just a symptom. The real catastrophe depicted in this material is a fundamental collapse of diplomatic alliances. It illustrates a scenario where the loss of institutional and moral authority creates a vacuum. The economic shocks, they're merely the downstream collateral damage of a superpower experiencing complete geopolitical isolation.
All right, well, let's get straight into the mechanics of why the economic reading is the only one actually grounded in the physical reality of the text.
Go for it.
The core thesis here is relentlessly anchored in market mechanics. It's about the self-destructive nature of disrupting international trade. The crisis isn't presented as some abstract, diplomatic faux pas. It's quantified immediately.
But the quantification...
Hang on. The text specifically points to the price shock, right? It explicitly warns us that when the price goes $8 up, now the world is going wild. Economies like Europe and Japan, they're paying the toll.
But you're completely missing the catalyst for that price spike.
Well, let me establish the mechanism first, because the mechanism is what matters. The animation focuses on the Strait of Hormuz, pointing out that 1 out of 5 barrels of the world's oil passes through it.
Right, the ultimate global choke point.
Exactly, and think about how the global oil market actually functions. You don't even need to physically stop a single Lego ship to cause that $8 spike.
True.
Futures markets price and risk instantaneously. If a superpower even threatens a choke point, the algorithmic trading of Brent crude spikes. Insurance premiums for maritime shipping just skyrocket. The global economy bleeds before a single shot is even fired.
I don't disagree with the market reality, but...
And the material mocks the state for planning the blockade on your own trade ship. It points out the sheer cognitive dissonance of demanding, keep it open, now you want it closed. It's a rigorous study in economic self-immolation. And the final judgment the text passes is purely financial. It says the price of the gas is your legacy.
Yeah, but see, that assumes the narrator views the price of gas as the ultimate metric of human achievement, which is a massive misreading of the text tone.
Is it, though? It's literally the punchline of the video.
Stanza. Yes, the economic pain is severe, it's immediate, but the true crisis, the root cause of what the narrator calls the glitch in the brain, is the complete and utter alienation of global institutions.
You mean the alliances?
Exactly. The text uses incredibly vivid imagery to show isolation in the face of a wasted investment. It says, trillions for NATO, and you're standing alone.
Right.
Why are you standing alone? It's not because of supply and demand. You are standing alone because your diplomatic compass is totally shattered.
But the isolation is precisely what causes the economic drift, though. You really can't separate the two.
No. The isolation is the primary failure. It goes way beyond trade. Look at the rejection by historic pillars of moral and institutional authority. We have the New York Times watching the game with a critical eye.
Sure, the media is watching.
But more damningly, we have the line, "Even the Pope is rejecting your throne," as the subject inexplicably resorts to attacking the Vatican. I mean, come on. You do not attack the Vatican to manipulate Brent crude futures.
Well, yeah, I'll give you that.
You do it because you are a leader who has alienated the entire moral world order. The economic shock is just the dashboard warning light telling you the engine of your statecraft has exploded.
Okay, I'll concede that the line attacking the Vatican completely breaks my purely economic model. You're right, nobody short sells oil by picking a fight with the Pope. It points to a broader erraticism.
Thank you.
But look at the language used to describe the consequences of that erraticism. The text accuses the actor of naked hypocrisy. It describes them aiming at your feet and shooting your own legs.
Right.
This is explicitly framed as a paradoxical, self-inflicted wound that destroys their own economic lifeblood.
Why assume the legs are economic, though?
Because the immediate context is the disruption of maritime trade ships. The Lego tanker's literally right there on screen. Let's map this onto a real-world mechanism.
Okay, let's map it.
Think of it like a corporate board of directors aggressively shorting their own company's stock. They deliberately tank their own valuation, maybe thinking they can squeeze a competitor or buy back control at a massive discount.
Right. A power play.
Exactly. They try to spin it as a strategic masterstroke, but what the video shows is that the market doesn't reward the trick. When the text says my brain is just glitching, the logic is exiled and labels the actor a powerful fool. It's describing a total collapse of rational economic self-interest.
I see where you're going, but
They shorted their own stock, and now the global market is just going to delist them entirely.
that analogy fundamentally misunderstands what a superpower actually is, though. You are treating the state like a corporation maximizing shareholder value.
Because that's how global trade operates.
But in geopolitics, the legs you stand on aren't just your GDP. They are your alliances, your treaties, and your soft power. We're talking about hegemonic stability theory here.
All right, explain how hegemonic stability theory applies to a bright plastic Lego blockade.
Gladly. The theory argues that the international system, including global trade, remains stable only as long as a single dominant nation-state, the hegemon, creates and enforces the rules.
Okay.
The global maritime system works because a superpower guarantees the safety of those sea lanes. So when the hegemon decides to plan a blockade on your own trade ship, the glitch in the brain isn't just a bad quarterly earnings report.
What is it then?
It's the superpower torching the very rules-based order it spent decades building. You are, as the text states, breaking every law, breaking every rule. The powerful fool is foolish because he is acting in a total vacuum of strategic foresight. He's dismantling the system that made him powerful to begin with.
But what is the actual punishment for breaking those rules? The rules they are breaking are fundamentally rules of commerce and maritime navigation.
But they're guaranteed by diplomacy.
Sure, but the text says Europe and Japan, they're paying the toll. That is a literal economic toll. If you are listening to this and trying to picture a modern superpower fighting the ocean out of despair, which is literally the imagery the animation uses, it sounds ridiculous.
It's absurd, yeah.
But think about the underlying mechanism. The despair stems from the realization that you cannot command the global market through sheer military force. You can block the Strait of Hormuz, sure, but the economic blowback hits your own citizens instantly.
See, you are determined to force every metaphor back into a ledger, but the text explicitly demands we look beyond the market, with its specific institutional references. Let's look at the juxtaposition it sets up.
You mean the Brother Louis line?
Yes. You love Brother Louis, but you hate the holy man.
Which, I've got to be honest, on the surface sounds like total nonsense lyrics for a fast-paced rap.
It sounds like nonsense until you translate what those archetypes actually mean in the real world. Brother Louis represents transactional, personality-driven diplomacy,
Oh, interesting.
right? It is the shallow, populist, perhaps even autocratic alliances that a rogue leader prefers because they demand zero institutional accountability.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the holy man, tied directly to the Pope and the Vatican, mentioned earlier, represents deep-rooted institutional, historical, and moral structures. It's the Geneva Conventions, the Bretton Woods system, the traditional pillars of global governance.
So you're saying the tragedy here is the shift from institutional alliance to a personality cult.
Exactly. It is a deliberate, disastrous realignment. The actor is choosing shallow validation while explicitly alienating the deepest wellsprings of global moral authority. When the text highlights that you spent trillions for NATO and you're standing alone, it's pointing out that military spending is basically worthless without the moral and institutional glue to hold an alliance together. You do not include the Vatican in a critique of oil prices unless you are trying to signify a total moral bankruptcy.
Look, I hear that, and mapping Brother Louis to transactional populist diplomacy is a really sharp way to decode the text. I'll give you that.
Thank you.
But I want to hold your feet to the fire on the causal chain here. Even when the text brings up these shifting regional alliances, what is the immediate, unavoidable consequence it couples them with?
Go on.
The text says, whose failing the region is shifting while your own economy is aimlessly drifting. The diplomatic shift is entirely subordinate to the economic drift. The narrator doesn't care about the Pope. The narrator cares about the drift.
No, the narrator is pointing out that the drift is the punishment for alienating the Pope.
But if this crisis is fundamentally about moral standing, about losing the respect of the New York Times and the Vatican, why does the text insist on its final judgment being purely financial?
Because
it explicitly states the price of the gas is your legacy. It doesn't say your legacy is your diplomatic isolation. It doesn't say your legacy is a fractured NATO. It's the price of gas. Doesn't that prove that when all the diplomatic posturing is stripped away, economic reality just fundamentally trumps institutional standing?
Absolutely not. The text says the price of the gas is your legacy, not because economics is the highest truth, but because it is the basest, most inescapable consequence of diplomatic failure for the average citizen.
I'm not sure I follow.
Think about the public. When a leader acts like a powerful fool, when they dismantle the rules-based order, the average person doesn't feel the abstract sting of a broken NATO treaty in their daily lives.
Right. They feel it at the pump.
Exactly. They feel it at the pump. The $8 gas is the crude, undeniable metric of high-level diplomatic incompetence. It's your legacy because it's the only tangible thing you've left the people to remember you by, having stripped away all the actual prestige and moral authority of the state.
Wow, okay. That's a very convenient way to dismiss the market's primacy. You're basically arguing that the economic pain is just the receipt for the diplomatic purchase?
I'm arguing that the ideology drives the action, and the action drives the price. And that actually brings us to the ideological core of the text. There is a line that perfectly encapsulates the tension between democratic responsibility and unilateral hubris.
Which line?
The text says, Joe said, say the Republic man, stop playing the king with a hole in your hand.
Okay, and how are you defining the Republic here?
The Republic is the consensus-driven democratic international order. Playing the king is the ultimate critique. This isn't just about a poorly calculated tariff or a bad trade policy.
Right.
It's about a fundamental betrayal of Republican values in favor of an authoritarian, unilateral fantasy. The blockade, the isolation, attacking the Vatican, it all stems from a leader deciding they are no longer bound by the consensus of the international community.
They want to rule by decree.
They want to be a king, but they have a hole in their hand, meaning their power is an illusion. It is slipping right through their fingers because you simply cannot unilaterally dictate terms to a globalized world.
Well, if you want to talk about what actually proves that power is an illusion, you have to look at what physically bypasses the king. You argue the hole in the hand is a loss of diplomatic power.
Yes.
But I argue the text shows the market itself providing the ultimate check on this hubris. Look at the mechanism introduced in the very next thought. Right after stop playing the king, the text introduces the freedom flow, tiller sailing to the coast, while you're busy being everybody's favorite roast.
With the tiller representing the ship, right? The physical trade itself.
Yes, global commerce.
The Freedom Flotilla represents the unstoppable, pragmatic movement of goods and capital. If you try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the market reacts. It routes around the damage.
Sure, the ships find another way.
Supply chains physically bypass rogue actors. It's the concept of inelastic demand finding alternative routing. The global market doesn't care if you're playing king. The oil will find a way to the coast regardless of your decrees.
But at what cost?
That's just it. The unilateral actor is left as everybody's favorite roast, mocked, and more importantly, economically bypassed. The hubris isn't defeated by a UN resolution, it is defeated by the relentless, pragmatic flow of global trade. The market outlives the king.
Okay, but you cannot separate the word freedom from flow. Freedom flow isn't just a cold market term describing alternative supply chain routing.
What else would it be?
Freedom is an ideological concept. The ships are sailing past the blockade because the international community, the Republic, refuses to indulge the king's delusion.
Oh, I see.
Right? The ridicule being everybody's favorite roast is a social and diplomatic punishment. You are laughed out of the room by the global community. The New York Times catches the joke. The Vatican rejects you. The ships sail past you.
It's all connected.
It is a total systemic collapse of legitimacy. The market only routes around you because your diplomatic legitimacy has already evaporated.
So we are looking at a real chicken and egg scenario here. Does the loss of legitimacy cause the economic bypass, or does the economic reality expose the lack of legitimacy?
Exactly.
Because if you're listening and visualizing this bright, fast-paced Lego animation, you're seeing a superpower throwing a temper tantrum in a bathtub. They want the trade lanes open, but they also want them closed. They spend trillions on a military alliance only to isolate themselves. They are literally shouting at the ocean.
Which perfectly captures the deep structural contradictions within the state's very identity. It is, as the text says, naked hypocrisy. You cannot have a functioning integrated economy if you are simultaneously tearing down the geopolitical framework that secures it.
Yeah, you really can't.
And the toy block aesthetic works so incredibly well because it highlights how infantile this approach to statecraft truly is. It reduces complex global interdependency to a toddler smashing their own toys and then crying because they have nothing left to play with.
And that brings us right back to the legacy left in the wake of that destruction. Look, I maintain that underneath the viral rep meme presentation, this material is a rigorous warning about the brutal realities of global economics.
Fair enough.
When a superpower forgets that its strength relies on the uninterrupted flow of global trade, when it plans a blockade on its own lifeblood, the inevitable result is self-harm. You shoot your own legs. The consequence is quantified in the $8 gas that drives the world wild.
Right.
And when the dust settles, it is the price of that gas, the economic ruin inflicted on your own citizens and the global market, that becomes the indelible, inescapable legacy of your administration.
And I remain convinced that focusing on the balance sheet fundamentally misdiagnoses the rot.
We'll have to agree to disagree there.
Indeed. Because the material is a profound commentary on the collapse of institutional alliances and moral authority. The economic damage is merely the physical manifestation of a spiritual and diplomatic disease.
The symptom, not the cause.
Precisely. When you abandon the democratic republic to play the unilateral king, when you cast aside deep historic alliances for frivolous transactional pursuits, you find yourself completely isolated. The true crisis isn't just that the ships have to find a new route, it's that the entire world order has rejected your throne.
Well, if nothing else, what this really demonstrates is the incredible density of meaning we can extract from unexpected places. It forces us to confront how modern media consumption actually works.
It really does.
We are presented with a 3-minute, brightly colored Lego animation designed for a young global audience on social media. It uses the visual language of a toy.
Right. It sneaks past our academic defenses. If this were a dry white paper on hegemonic stability theory and the vulnerabilities of the Strait of Hormuz, most people just wouldn't engage with it.
Obviously not.
But by packaging it in a hyperkinetic, viral format, it forces the listener to grapple with the terrifying fragility of global supply chains and diplomatic norms.
It absolutely does. It leaves us with a lingering, unresolved tension, about the mechanics of our modern world. When a dominant power begins to glitch, when logic is exiled and the powerful fool is left shouting at the ocean, what actually breaks first?
Is it the economy or the diplomacy?
Exactly. Is it the collapse of our wealth and our supply chains, or is it the collapse of our values and our alliances that seals our fate? The source material lays out compelling evidence for both, but it's up to you to decide which failure truly defines the crisis.